You also have to calibrate your technology to filter out other disturbances, cell phones, machinery, a vehicle, an airplane engine. So once you begin to understand the algorithms and you are filtering these things out, you're also able to see what they are. So by default, we began to detect other types of threats.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 152. What do weather detection systems have to do with the drone industry? For that question, we go to Tampa, Florida, and talk to the CEO and CTO of Entropy Technology Designs, a company that specializes in developing portable, handheld technology that detects severe weather threats such as lightning and tornadoes in real time. Its proprietary technology can also be used to detect other threats, such as mortar fire, sandstorms, tunneling, and drones. Tammy Fitzpatrick is the CEO of Entropy Technologies Design and has 25 years' experience in small corporate management, public relations, international trade development, and all factors related to product development, sales, and marketing. Over the past 10 years, she has focused on developing and launching product concepts across government, commercial, and consumer markets. Joining Tammy in this podcast is Edward Shaver, the CTO. Edward is a physicist, inventor, and published author. Prior to joining Entropy, Edward led the development and production of the first commercially viable handheld lightning detector and the first handheld product capable of tracking the motion of full thunderstorms. In 2012, Edward developed the Storm Vector Area Warning System, which uses wireless communication to provide storm warning in large industrial facilities, college campuses, and even areas the size of small cities. In this edition of the Drone Radio Show, Tammy and Edward talk about the company's revolutionary handheld weather detection system and how it can be leveraged to make drones fly safer, and how it can be used by military, government, and commercial drone sectors to support their mission or business objectives. This is a great story of a core technology in a completely different field, finding application and utility in the drone industry. But before we hear from Tammy and Edward, I want to thank those of you who have been supporting my funding campaign on Patreon. For as little as $1 per month, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. Go to patreon.com/drone radio show to join the team. So let's learn how Entropy Technology Design is impacting the drone industry. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Tammy and Edward to introduce themselves.
My name is Tammy Fitzpatrick. I am the founder and CEO of Entropy Technology Design.
And I am Edward Shaver. I'm the CTO of Entropy Technology Designs.
Tammy, can you give us some background on the company?
I founded Entropy about 4 years ago. I've actually been in the weather industry for over a decade. This is not the first time I've been involved with this type of technology. I, in fact, sold about $3 million worth of handheld weather detectors that my CTO previously invented, sold those globally. So I really got to understand the market for this, the need, the pain that exists around the world with regard to weather information.
What's the primary product or the service that you provide?
Basically, in a nutshell, we've created a technology we've named Nimbus, and this is a completely new type of weather detection technology. We're focused on low-frequency magnetic field detection, and we started out very focused on lightning because my co-founder and CTO, Edward Shaver, who is a physicist, he's been focused on this industry since the late 90s.
Back in the 80s, I was doing work for DOD. There was an article in the Washington Post one day about a little boy that was struck and killed standing at second base of a Little League field. And the gist of the story was this was a tragedy, act of God. If you're going to play baseball in the summertime, what can you do? And it occurred to me as a physicist, something could be done. There should have been some product that could have been used at the field that day that would have been able to give reliable warning in the hands of non-technical people. And in the late 80s, there was nothing like that was usable by a Little League team on a Little League field in the middle of nowhere. And that led me into research into what could be made and what could be designed. And that first product design was a product called SkyScan, which was, at the time, really the first practical standalone battery-powered lightning detector. It was introduced in 1995, and I think you can still buy it today on eBay at a low-end, knockoff Chinese product. So the technology platform we designed still works. One of the interesting things that I got into when I was looking for ways to design a product that could be used in these applications and still work and be portable and battery-powered was that a lot of the weather detection technology focused on lightning was higher frequencies, it was radar, it was big, expensive technology that you couldn't downsize, and for a variety of reasons, you couldn't fold into a small product. And that got me doing research into very low-frequency magnetic fields, which was pretty much an area that nobody does much in because we don't do much down there in terms of commercial communications. Cell phones don't work there. Nothing really operates down there. So it's kind of a forgotten area of physics and communications and detection equipment. And so we kind of had to invent everything as we were doing the design of the SkyScan from scratch. There wasn't any rules to follow. But what we began to learn in doing the research was that there was an incredible amount of weather data being created by nature at these frequencies that nobody was listening to. There were things happening that were simply not talked about in the textbooks. And the more I got into the research, the more interested I became at following this up and really trying to cultivate what was, to me, a basically untapped area of knowledge and information about storms and storm development.
Hasn't weather reporting evolved substantially since the 1990s? I mean, every night we come home and we turn on the news and we see Doppler weather reports, we see lightning strike maps, we see real-time forecasts. Isn't that sufficient?
What you rely on today for weather information, quite frankly, everyone considers it good enough. The jokes about the weatherman usually being inaccurate, et cetera. Everyone thinks that what they have is acceptable. And what my passion is to explain, first of all, that what you're relying on, while it serves its purpose, and we certainly wouldn't want to remove it, but what you're relying on is delayed information. Meteorologists use their equipment, their odometers, their wind meters, their satellites to pull information in from above. That information takes time to be analyzed and then distributed, whether it's through the television that you look at, your app on your phone, that weather app that you look at, or on your computer. All that information is actually delayed by the time it reaches you. The second issue with that is that it's blanketed information. You may be located in one area, and the information that you're getting could apply to, let's say, a 10, 20 to 50 mile surface around you. So you're not really getting accurate information. Why I'm passionate about what we've created is because we're developing something that is real-time, self-contained. It is accurate from the palm of your hand, if you will. Our first product will come out as a handheld device. It's looking out at a radius of 600 miles around you.
In most applications, that's way, way farther than anybody needs to see. But what it does is it gives us very high resolution information for things happening much closer. And that's of value to a lot of applications.
So for those people that say, okay, I want to take the kids out golfing, or I want to go to the pool, or if you're an industrial application and you've got an oil rig, and by regulation you have to know what's happening around you in your specific vicinity, that's when Nimbus comes to play. You certainly need to rely on some of the other information that you have, because you have to have a full perspective of what's happening around you when it comes to severe weather, especially lightning. But again, Nimbus brings something much more accurate and in a frequency that nobody's really focused on. So again, as I said, in a handheld device, you'll be able to understand how fast the lightning or storm is approaching you, how much time before it's going to be directly overhead. More importantly, also, once the storm has passed, many people think the sky is blue. I can go back out and resume my activity. But 70% of fatalities and injuries occur after a storm has passed over and the sky is blue. Well, that lightning bolt is striking from up to 10 miles away, and it is wreaking havoc still, even after it's passed. So my agenda with the Nimbus is to be able to provide a very rich amount of data to the user so that they can make much better informed decisions on what they're doing.
So do you see a broad base of users for this technology, say from large industrial clients all the way down to families who are just interested in the weather for whatever decisions they want to make?
Because I've sold this technology a previous generation extensively, I've sold to the soccer mom. I was a mom of a cheerleader who was playing on the football team or who was cheering on the football team. So I am that person. I have sold to universities, schools. I have sold to really anyone that if you're working or playing outdoors, you need to have better information, especially where you and I are located. We're in the lightning capital of the United States. So there's a lot of activity, and obviously there's Tornado Alley. There are a lot of areas throughout the United States that, you need to have more accurate information. So I can speak to the consumer. I can speak to large industrial applications. Let me take, for example, oil and gas. I sold extensively into that market because what I learned was very interesting. A lot of these big corporations, by regs, they have to know how much time before they can shut down the machinery or the entire rig. So the more detailed information they have, the better. So they're relying on their meteorologists. They have all of that data. But what they were missing was something happening on the spot. So the handheld devices would function in that way that they can give them that real-time information, because maybe they need a half hour before they can actually get everything shut down. So this would give them, our technology would give them all that detail so they understand how much time, how fast that storm is approaching, if there are other storms dropping in overhead. All that information is coming to them on the spot, unlike a feed that they're going to receive, whether it's on their television or on their application. They're getting that information from us real time.
Awareness of severe weather impacts today is so much higher than in years past, as evidenced when major sporting events or concerts are halted due to an oncoming storm. How would your technology benefit these situations?
That information we're giving is on the spot. So, for example, if you're in a football stadium, they are using their own systems. They're looking at those meteorologists' reports. They're getting all that data. Keep in mind, again, that a lot of that information is delayed. It could be up to 10-minute delayed information if it's coming in from a satellite. What we're doing is giving them actual on-the-spot timing information. So, say you have a football game going, from the meteorologist that there's storm activity forming out. It's coming towards us. We're getting additional details. How fast is it coming from Nimbus? How much time do you have before it's really overhead, as I said? And so we're working in line with this information so they can accurately make those decisions. As I said, safety, productivity, liability. If you're responsible for kids on a football field, you're responsible for those football players and all the people cheering in the stands, you have to be able to make accurate decisions. I can't tell you how many times I ran across companies where they were relying on their data, not related to what I was presenting to them, but they would shut down the crew or they would shut down that football game and wait because they don't have real-time information. They couldn't understand or they didn't know whether or not there was going to be lightning. So they waited. Maybe lightning happened. Maybe it didn't. They resume activity. Sometimes something happens from that. Whereas with Nimbus, you'll have that information. You'll be able to make much better decisions in real time.
One of the things that Entropy has learned in talking to customers that are interested in our technology is that time is much more important to somebody who has to make a critical decision. He doesn't need to be told after something has happened. He needs to have 10 minutes warning or 8 minutes warning or 20 minutes warning. And that time requires a higher level of resolution and a higher level of data that's specific to his location in order to make a decision.
I find this really fascinating, but if I can segue back to my podcast, what's the connection between the Nimbus system and the drone industry?
That's the interesting part. As I said, the company started out very, very focused on the weather industry because we do this extremely well. Because we do this so well, because we understand lightning, cloud activity, the currents, if you will, the electrical currents that are taking place along this frequency, because we see those so well, you also have to calibrate your technology to filter out other disturbances, cell phones, machinery, a vehicle, an airplane engine. So once you begin to understand the algorithms and you are filtering these things out, you're also able to see what they are. So by default, we began to detect other types of threats. This is why the drone industry has become so fascinating. We are able to detect mortar fire, tunneling, with additional R&D, be able to eventually detect earthquakes and solar storms. So we're able to detect all of these other anomalies that are taking place, but that's where we started to really get interest ourselves, and also from the outside. The military and government is clearly very, very intrigued by what we are able to see. Because our device is not giving off any signal itself, it's one of those safe sounds, if you will. They're intrigued to understand what it is that we are able to detect with this. So, when a drone is flying over, we're able to pick up those signals that small motor gives off, unlike any other detection device that's out there that we're aware of. So we're picking up on a frequency that no one else is really paying attention to, and that's strengthening our technology as well. And it's really fascinating to me to be able to pick up on these things, to be able to support the military, government. You'd be surprised how many different applications there are.
One of the applications we're looking at is that we are talking to drone manufacturers about putting Nimbus sensors on the drones so that you can have a moving sensor field that can move and give you data covering an area as big as you have coverage for your drones, which gives some incredibly powerful ways to track fast-changing events, things like squall lines that can produce tornadoes, things like hurricanes as they come on shore and are spawning tornadoes out of the rain bands or moving quickly. So one of the interesting applications I see as a physicist is combining the Nimbus ability to see data fields out of storms that aren't seen right now, and combine that with the ability of drones to move at real time through the landscape and to go exactly where you need to see data created.
Taking it a step further, one could develop algorithms to automatically steer a drone away from those situations.
One of the applications that we are working on is drone navigation. Clearly, the major commercial players like Amazon that want to fill the skies with drones delivering things have got to be able to navigate in real time in bad weather. The drone commercial fleet has to be as reliable as cars on the road if people are going to rely on it for that purpose. And obviously a major problem in flying drones is making sure you have a data field about real-time weather that can bring a drone down so that the drones as they fly can react in real time to weather as it changes in real time. And one of the problems now, even identified by the major players, is that the data field coming out of the National Weather System is not high resolution enough to allow that to happen. And so there are two approaches that I can see, both of which the Nimbus technology might contribute to. One, as you say, is you could put a Nimbus sensor on a drone that makes sure it never flies into bad weather because it's seeing weather in real time. It's getting weather information out there faster than it could be possibly downloaded from any source because the drone is detecting it as it moves. Another option might be to put a Nimbus set of sensors in a metropolitan area, let's say, that creates a data field that could then be tapped into by drones as they fly. So we're looking at both of those applications where the Nimbus, the quality of the Nimbus real-time data can be used in real time by drones as they're trying to move through the landscape at speed and still do the job that they're designed to do.
Adding a sensor to a drone, is that a simple thing to do?
It probably isn't as simple as we'd like to think, but the good news is that the Nimbus technology is scalable down to a very small level. So, if you go to our website and look at the Nimbus 4 handheld product, well, that's a pretty big box. You couldn't put that on a drone, but you wouldn't need all that to give the drone the information it needs to make real-time course corrections about real-time weather. Eventually, we could reduce the entire Nimbus part of that down to a single chip that could be added to the rest of the electronics package on a drone.
We can put them on drones. We can put them on cell towers. We can really mount them anywhere. And then we could create mesh networks where that data is being pulled in and distributed onto cell phone apps. So there's a lot of different opportunities.
So where are you in terms of introducing the technology into the drone industry?
We're in the process of forming the partnerships with drone manufacturers or people that are in the commercial side of the drones. And it looks to us like that's the way to get our technology into the right places most efficiently. Interestingly, we've been approached by two different kinds of drone people. One are the drone people that are working almost exclusively in the military applications part, and then there's the separate commercial side. And they often have kind of different approaches to things. What we're going to try to do is cultivate the right working relationships with both kinds of people so that the Nimbus technology can go to the places that it can do the most good. And as I said before, one of the really interesting applications that I'm looking at as a physicist is finding drone manufacturers that are making much larger commercial class of drones that are capable of staying in the air for 10 or 12 hours. And these are the drones that I think could be amazing in terms of putting Nimbus sensors on to create data fields that cover very large areas and can react in real time to weather as it forms, dangerous weather, and immediately give a class of data back into the public that doesn't exist right now.
I know you're working on the release of the Nimbus technology. When do you expect it to be available to consumers and industry?
We are probably 17 to 18 weeks away from being in the marketplace. We are currently still accepting investment opportunities right now. So that's probably the most intriguing part of this. We are inches away from launching this. We've done most of the hardware, software design of this. We just have a few small areas that we need to tweak. We're pretty close. As I said, we've been doing field testing now for 2 years, and the information that we're pulling is extremely intriguing.
Is there anything about the company or the technology that we missed that we should talk about?
One of the things that I think differentiates Entropy's approach to technology is that we really have a goal of making what appears to be low technology. In other words, our products aren't that expensive to make. They're not million-dollar radar systems. They're not on satellites. Because one of the things that I've learned through the years is that you have to listen in the ways that Mother Nature wants to talk to you. She doesn't often or always talk to you the way you would like. And our mission as a company has been to find ways with the least complicated and least expensive equipment as possible to extract new data out there that simply isn't being used, but that could be used, and that can give you information and answers that simply aren't available right now. So we're trying to take a low technology approach to solving problems by finding ways to extract data in simpler ways, because the data really is what you need to make decisions and change the world.
I'd like to switch gears a little and learn a little more about you, Tammy. How did you come to leading the startup company?
I've actually had an interesting life. There's been a couple articles done on me not too long ago. USA Weekly did an interview, and also Sway Magazine did an interview. I'm originally from Iowa. Grew up in a small town on a gravel road, loved riding my horses. I then found myself years later after college in the Middle East. I spent about 15 years in Beirut. The last 7 of those years, I actually worked for the State Department at the U.S. Embassy there. And in 2006, when war broke out between Israel and Hezbollah and bombs were going off, that is when I decided it was time to come home. And I asked the ambassador if we could be on the last chopper out of the country. So I took my 3 children and my then husband, and we had 1 suitcase each. We evacuated in the back of those military choppers with bombs going off, and we came home. So when I came back to the States, as you can imagine, I was trying to get reacclimated to life here again in my home country, which I was really thrilled to be back and involved here. That is when I first met my co-founder and the CTO of the company. When I first met him, he was talking about why he decided to get into this industry. When I heard the passion about his conviction to find a solution, that's when I decided, this would be a fantastic field to get into, because I did have global contacts as well. So I had a company before Entropy that was selling previous invention of my CTO. And that's where I sold the $3 million in the handheld light meat detector. And that's really where I learned the ropes on being a CEO, doing the global marketing for a product like this. If you will, I learned hard knock lessons on how to survive in that world. And when that company, when we wanted to expand and basically create Nimbus, the people I was doing business with were not interested in that. They were actually quite pleased with selling the previous product. And so we stepped away from that, and I created Entropy. And I like to say I brought the best of the best into this company, where anyone who's been in business before, you have to learn with the good and the bad, and you have to bring the best forward and stay focused. And that's really where I'm at today, is extremely focused and dedicated and very, very determined to bring this product to market, because I know that it will make a difference around the world in saving lives and changing the weather industry. Let's give the weatherman and the weatherwoman a little bit better reputation going forward. Hopefully we'll be able to incorporate our technology on a much broader scale so that we can really enrich the data that everyone receives on a day-to-day basis.
Based on your experience in the technology field, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs in the drone industry?
A couple different things. If you're a woman, access to capital remains one of the biggest issues. Women are oftentimes the last person to get funded, unfortunately. And I know I've just taken part in some different conferences with the National Women's Organization, the Small Business Administration. I myself, by the way, have been vice chair for the Florida Small Business Development Council Advisory Board. And I've been vice chair for them for, 5 years now. In the past, I was also on the Board of Governors for the Florida Chamber of Commerce and their Small Business Council chair. So I got into those things because I was an entrepreneur and because I really wanted to see what was happening on the ground, because you do run into a lot of roadblocks. The wonderful thing that's happening now for a lot of entrepreneurs, there's a large amount of accelerator programs out there that can help you along. There's a lot of free advice and support out there. My perspective on this, again, if you're a woman, you're going to run into some other challenges. Reach out to other women like yourself. Reach out to me. More than happy to help anywhere that I can. Stay focused. Get your business plan in order. Get your ducks in a row, if you will. Make sure that you have your business strategy. Your 12, 18, 36 month strategy. Understand what type of budget that you're going to need. Take care of yourself too. I think one of the things, in fact, when I was interviewed, it seems to be a acceptable scenario where if you're an entrepreneur and you're starting something, you have to starve. You've got to suffer all the way through until you get that baby out to market. I think that's okay, yet it's not. We're trying to bring something forward. If we're creative, we have to be able to support ourselves too. Don't be afraid to say to that potential investor, I have to be able to survive as well. I don't need to make a fortune right now, but I've got to be able to keep myself going here as well. I think people are afraid to ask for themselves. And I'd like to see that change. Men, women, regardless of who you are, but staying to it. I could have given up on this technology long ago, but I've stayed to it. I have a saying that I really like. The person who says something is impossible should not interrupt the person who is doing it. I'm doing it. I'm focused on it. And that's a Chinese proverb that I ran across that I think is really effective. So, don't give up on your dream. If you believe in this, you've got to follow through. It's not easy. If it was that easy, everyone would be doing it. And another comment to make on that, when you're bringing something like we are, it's an alien concept. Everybody says, you're doing what? What frequency? Oh, the weatherman, the app I have on my phone, that's great. I don't need anything different. Well, when you're trying to bring something new into the marketplace, don't be daunted by someone saying to you, I've got something and it works fine. I don't need it. Stick with it. Don't give up. You got to be tough. And you got to stay focused if you believe in it.
And Edward, as an inventor yourself, what advice would you give to others who may have an idea that they think will change the world?
There is no doubt that the hardest part about being an inventor is actually taking an idea, taking that piece of paper and getting it out there in the real world and doing something. And so I would say from my own perspective, you have to have a passion for what you want to do and know what you want to achieve. And, going back to my Skyscan experience, it was fairly clear to me. I wanted to produce a product that solved the problem I read about in that newspaper article. So I had a really clear goal, and I'm the kind of individual that once you give me a clear goal, that's a very dangerous thing because I usually won't stop. But you also have to be able to learn as you go. One of the things that, and in fact, it's probably come out of our discussion here about the Nimbus, the Nimbus technology is clearly going to go in directions that I never anticipated when I started this 30 years ago. I'm inventing things in areas that I had no idea that I'd be inventing things in areas that didn't exist 30 years ago. So one of the things you have to do is, I think, get a passion for doing something, but then understand that the world around you may change and modify that as you go, and you have to be able to let that happen and learn from it, and learn as you go. The thing that makes it interesting to me from day one is, what do I have to learn to be able to do this? That's literally the question I had to ask myself when I sat down to say, how can I invent a product that could have been at that Little League field? I had to say, what do I have to learn to make a storm detection product and go from there? And the road is still stretching out in front of me. I'm still learning as I go.
And for my final question, Tammy, what message would you like to leave in regard to Entropy Technologies design, its products, and the drone industry?
When you have something that is very disruptive, very unique, and moves outside of the normal realm of thinking, don't give up on it. Stay focused with it. I know, because I've been doing this testing now for 2 years, we know what we have. We know its abilities, and we're very confident in what it can do. So my goal is to really take this on a global level. Climate change is very real. There's a lot of activity going on around the planet. The drone industry is exploding, and our technology can apply both to drones as far as detect them and also helping navigate them in severe weather so that they don't get struck by lightning. If you're out there developing your own drone and you put a lot of time and effort and money into it, and you take it out and it gets caught up in a storm, or worse yet, struck by lightning, that's not a scenario. People lose thousands of dollars when they've put them into these drones. So there's applications for it everywhere. The drone industry is, like I said, we all know it's exploding. It's very intriguing. FAA has got to make sure that there's some kind of coordination in the airways with these drones, because it's happening. It's part of the future. It's going to do what it's going to do. We've just got to be ready for it and prepared to address it and accept it.
That's it for episode 152 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Tammy Fitzpatrick and Edward Shaver of Entropy Technologies Design and learning about weather detection systems and drones. I want to thank Tammy and Edward for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about Entropy Technologies Design, the Nimbus system, or want to connect with Tammy and Edward, check out their webpage at nimbus4.com. If you enjoyed listening to Edward Shaver talk about the technical aspects of the Nimbus 4 technology, I've posted about 6 minutes of bonus content at the end of this podcast, where Edward goes into more detail on detecting weather patterns and how the system works. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1 per month, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to patreon.com/Drone Radio Show. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Gores.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.
For most of us, when we go out and we see the weather, the difference between a sunshiny day and a stormy day, we're able to see the wind pick up, the clouds pick up, and there's moisture in the air. For us, we know that a storm is coming. And you talked about how there's certain patterns that a storm projects before it even shows up. What are some of the things that your system is able to see that we're not able to see until it actually is upon us?
Well, if you think about it, basic physics says every time an electron moves, it creates a magnetic field. This is the one favor that Mother Nature does for us. A thunderstorm is nothing more than a gigantic collection of charge that's moving and collecting at different levels, separating into positive and negative, and that becomes essentially that charge capacitor that eventually produces a lightning stroke. But long before that lightning stroke forms, there are charges moving and very low frequency signals being generated that are telling you that these charges are forming. They're telling you the various stages of the thunderstorm as it begins to accumulate those charge concentrations and gets ready to have enough accumulated energy to release a lightning stroke. A byproduct of that is something like a tornado, for instance. Tornado, lightning, wind, rain, these are all ways that a thunderstorm releases the energy that it collects and stores up in it. Energy comes out in different forms. Things like lightning and tornadoes and wind are the most dangerous because that causes damage and that risks lives. So that if you can develop a way to listen to the rhythm of that thunderstorm, we really like to say that the nimbus is listening to the heartbeat of that storm because it's hearing all these very subtle signals, much more subtle than the rain and the wind and the big things that you can see, because those early signals are telling you when danger is developing, and they're very specific as to where in the landscape the danger is the worst. And specific is important, especially if you're trying to locate the very small part of a very large thunderstorm, for instance, that has the potential to become a tornado. And we believe that the Nimbus technology is able to begin to give really useful information in terms of warning and lead time to individuals, to first responders, to emergency management people. And in this day and age, it's not reacting after something has happened. It's trying to give people information in advance so you can anticipate a problem and maybe do things to save property, save lives, protect the public that comes from having advanced information instead of information that something just happened over there. The other thing that I learned in doing the research down at these frequencies is that there's a lot of information that storms broadcast as they develop and as they form and as they evolve. Thunderstorms have life cycles, and the patterns in the magnetic fields that are generated as the storms go through these various stages have the ability to give us a tremendous amount of information about where storms are happening, how fast they're getting violent, how violent they may become. And I think it also gives us a handle on predicting things like tornado formation, which are, even today, a fast developing mystery that is very seldom accurately tracked or warned about with the standard weather radar and the standard weather information system for the country.
When the Nimbus is detecting something like lightning strikes, is it detecting the conditions that make a lightning strike highly probable, or is it able to detect or give information where they think a lightning strike is going to occur?
You really can't predict where a lightning stroke is going to occur because Mother Nature just doesn't cooperate. What you can say, and that's, for instance, why the field mill technology, which tries to look at a sudden change in, the charge gradient in an area, you can sometimes see things at very close range with very little lead time. It's difficult, though. What the Nimbus can do is pinpoint the small part of a storm that becomes more violent. One of the reasons we're looking for that is we are trying to be able to predict pre-tornado conditions. So as a thunderstorm is out there dropping lightning down, the Nimbus will tell you that the parts of the storm that are active, and a thunderstorm, as it produces lightning, produces it usually in small areas as it moves, because that's where the charge separation becomes high for a brief period of time. Those are the areas that are much more likely to produce lightning, and those will be identified. In other words, we can knock that down into a quarter of a mile area or a half a mile square area in that storm that clearly is the most active right now. But we can also see the storm as it deforms if it begins to go through the deformations that happen when you start to produce a tornado. If you think about it, a thunderstorm is this big giant layer of different charge separations. And what happens occasionally to form a tornado is that whole structure begins to deform, and one part of it actually gets pulled down toward the ground, and that's where your tornado forms. As that happens, that's a mechanical deformation. And as the storm deforms, all those different charge layers begin to interact and produce signals because they have to. And so what we are learning about and getting better and better at seeing are the kinds of signals that get produced as the storm deforms when it's trying to form a tornado or when it's likely to form a tornado.
How does it compare to what we typically see now on the news with weather bureaus and what they're reporting on during this storm?
Almost everything you see on weather reports are either your local weather station or somebody that's downloading the data flow from the National Weather Radar System or the National Lightning Detection Network, which is good data. The problem I discovered 25 years ago, in fact, when we were designing the Skyscan product, is that these very large information systems were designed to basically give regional weather forecasts. They were designed to track storm fronts moving across a state, storms moving in from the ocean. They were large-scale data fields covering large-scale events. When you get out into the landscape and you're talking to an individual who's trying to protect a Little League field at a particular place somewhere, if you're talking to somebody who's running a manufacturing complex and he has to know very precisely what's happening in relation to him and the time in relation to him, the information coming out of these large-scale systems is either too broad, in other words, it's not granular enough, or it's time delayed and doesn't give him real-time advance warning of something happening. One of the things that Entropy has learned in talking to customers that are interested in our technology is that time is much more important to somebody who has to make a critical decision. He doesn't need to be told after something has happened. He needs to have 10 minutes warning or 8 minutes warning or 20 minutes warning. And that time requires a higher level of resolution and a higher level of data that's specific to his location in order to make a decision. And so the idea for our technology is that the Nimbus sensor is where you are. So it's not waiting for information to be filtered up into the National Weather System and then filtered back through a TV station or back through a radio station or back through an app on your phone. It's data generated where you are, and in a fraction of a second, it's processed and giving you information about where you are. So we are real time, much faster than the general system can react. And we are much more accurate because our data is specific to where you're standing or specific to the location that you are concerned about.
So if, for example, a sporting event, maybe a baseball game or something like that wants to ensure that they have the best advance warning of a severe system, what do they actually need to use your system? Do they have to have like trucks of equipment or is it portable?
All you would need is a handheld product. If you go to our website, the Nimbus 4D is the first incarnation of the Nimbus, which is designed for, it's a single source. You can carry it around. It weighs 3 pounds. It's powered by a rechargeable lithium-ion battery. It's a self-contained handheld product. That's all you would need to take to a Little League field or a specific location. And the accuracy of the data coming out of the Nimbus is high enough that you can use it for higher-end applications, critical industrial applications or military applications. It really was designed to be industrial, / military grade handheld storm detector.
Where is the company now in terms of its schedule or what it needs to do to release the Nimbus product?
What we have accomplished at this point is the design of the basic Nimbus sensor. We've completed 2 full storm seasons of data collection and calibration, and that's why we have a really good idea of the capability of the product. As I say, that's how we know the kind of detection range we're getting with a handheld product, which is pretty unbelievable. In fact, one of the things we did this past summer was use the Nimbus to track Hurricane Irma when she came on shore. And one of the very interesting things we saw in our data field that the Nimbus detected much, much faster than the conventional weather sources watching the hurricane come on shore is that we saw and predicted the decay of the eye wall much, much faster. And so we were able to plot the weakening of the storm, I would say, close to an hour before at least the public announcements were coming across the television. And it's just an example of the quality of the data that we're seeing that other people aren't looking at because no one has begun to sample the data coming out for these particular things.